Good morning. My name's Neil Bradley. I'm the Executive Vice President, Chief Policy Officer, and Head of Advocacy at the U.S. Chamber. And you've already heard from our President and CEO about some of the breadth of the issues that we work on. I want to tell you a little bit about why we engage in the public policy process and why this is such an important time for chambers of commerce at the national level, the state level, the local level, and for individual businesses to be engaged. You know, we have the good fortune of representing businesses of every size across every industry. And often, people who don't know the chamber well assume that that must mean lots of conflicting interests, lots of divergent opinions. But the reality is that we find that whether you're a storied American company with a brand known globally, or whether you just started your business last week or last year. By the way, as 1,000 people in Cook County did last year, filed a business application to start a new business. So whether you're the newest kid on the block or the oldest employer on the block, the needs are really the same. It's about a playing field that allows you to innovate and compete. It's about clear rules of the road. It's about a safe environment to build and grow your business for your employees. And so when we have the good fortune of engaging policymakers, Democrats, Republicans, the folks who are in between, the message is always the same, that what our members are looking for is an end to some of the excuses about why government can't create that playing field and solutions to get it done. Sometimes these are things that everyone is dealing with. Taxes and crime and trade, as you talked about this morning. Sometimes it's about the rules of the road for the most innovative technologies. And so this morning, we're going to have a discussion with two companies right here in Chicago, one well-established, multi-billion-dollar corporation, and one a fairly new entrant, a fairly new employer in Chicago. You're going to hear a little bit about their stories, but what I want you to listen for isn't so much the differences of what they do, but the things that they're looking for in public policy that are the same, and then what we can do to engage lawmakers in Springfield, to engage lawmakers in Washington, D.C., to make it easier for them to do what they do best, which is meet the needs of their customers. So I'm going to invite my co-panelists up, and we'll get started with the conversation. And we, too, will be taking audience questions, so don't forget to make your QR code, put them in, and we'll get to them in just a moment. So joining me today is Kristen Kogel, the Chief Legal Officer, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary for Zebra Technologies. You're a $5 billion-plus company who makes a lot of things that maybe you don't see, and increasingly a lot of things that you do see, but that are in our environment every day. And then I'm joined by Dhruv Shivakumar, who's the CEO and co-founder of Cohesion. You're a growth stage company that makes smart building software. So the key to any good company, at least as our members tell it, is identifying a need that exists and then meeting that need. So one need that almost every business has faced over the last couple of years is managing a really difficult and broken supply chain system, knowing where your goods are or where they need to be, or the parts that Suzanne referenced that you need to get in to make that finished product. Kristen, Zebra provides solutions in that space as well as many others. Tell us a little bit about what Zebra does and how you're meeting some of the challenges that your customers face.
Sure. Thanks, Neil. Good morning, everyone. And I wanted to start off by thanking the Chamber and all the chambers here, as well as Cranes Chicago. I mean, if you think of two voices for business, be it here in Chicago with Cranes, the quintessential magazine for business. I mean, if you want to know what's going on in the business community, it is Cranes. And if you want to know what's going on in Washington, D.C. as a business entity, it is the Chamber. So I think having this event where we're talking about these topics couldn't be hosted by two better organizations. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my favorite topic, which is Zebra Technologies. And I know we talked about how Zebra is a big company, but I would argue it's a company that probably, as Neil said, you interact with and have no idea who we are. And no, we do not sell those pens. They are awesome pens. They are not ours. And if you're in Chicago and you see those zebra insurance, that is not us either. So you interact with us every day because we put a digital footprint to a physical asset. So whether you're at a grocery store in the checkout lane and you're scanning something in a bed, Zebra scanner. If you are in getting an e-commerce item, whether the item went through the barcode, and by the way, the Zebra name came from that barcode. The black and white stripes is Zebra. And for those who don't know, Zebra is a homegrown Chicago company, headquartered in Lincolnshire, founded 53 years ago. So a technology company in the Midwest with the very much the culture and personality of a Midwest company. And we've grown to be an S&P 500 company over the past many years. So we're very proud of our Chicago roots and proud of what we're doing, but we know we're hiding in plain sight. So I wanted to give you a sense to know what we do. So when you're in a hospital, you're wearing a wristband, scanning that barcode so that the nurse and the doctor are able to track and have security, right? Not only get the right medicine, but have the security of that medicine being tied together between a barcode scanner, between a printer. I think one of the easiest ways, though, to tell everyone what Zebra does is, how many of you watch any form of NFL football? So you see that real-time, next-gen stats? That's Zebra technology in the shoulder pads and in the ball. So if we can tell how fast someone is moving, how many yards they ran, which way they went, which way they stopped, and we won't talk about the other information we might be able to gather, that is NFL information, but we have all that information, right? We can surely tell you that in this buy online, pick up in store, in this demand economy during the pandemic, that if I wanted to pick up a pair of jeans at the store, where that might be, right? Because in the chaos that goes through a given day, being able to physically track that asset and know if I'm on a manufacturing floor and I have to shut down a line because I'm short and I know somewhere I have a box of whichever component part I need to have to continue on with my manufacturing line, Zebra provides that technology to see it. So what we really do is give edge information. Everyone talks about data of record, right? I've got it, I can audit it, I can look at it. But this is information at the edge. This is information for the frontline associate, a nurse in a hospital, someone in a warehouse, right? Being able to figure out where they're, what lane they're driving down. And it's the tool that makes their job easier so that you're not walking around back and forth. We also have, cobots in that space. So the technology of, hey, we can walk part of the way, but we're having other tools that make it easier for the workers. So doing both what the business needs to be able to see, sense it, analyze it, and act on it, but putting that tool in the hands of the frontline worker. So if you think of what we went through with supply chain, right? That is an area where, having the visibility to where your goods are. And frankly, from a government perspective, then speaking to, everyone's going to develop their own little private silo. And we're doing that because in the absence of support, in the absence of standardization, we're going to do what we have to do to get it done, right? We all are. And we're going to develop those tools and help businesses get it done. But having government with a framework, a government with, a set of rules and a standardization. And I know we'll get there in this conversation, but somehow we all came together, how many years ago, to figure out how we can all talk on phones all over the world, right? We should be able to do that with the rest of this IoT technology. I know my co-panelists through, in the IoT world, that we should be able to sense, analyze, and act and be able to communicate that way on a standardization. And I think the government really, could step in there.
So we are going to get to some of those policy issues that would help solve some of these problems. But Through, I want to bring you in to this conversation. And first, in the last discussion, we talked about return to office. And if there's one thing we do know, is it's just not going to be the same as it was before, which means that we're going to work differently and that our offices are going to operate differently. You're helping companies figure out how they're going to operate. What does that look like, and how does Cohesion help them solve these problems?
Yeah, thank you. As we've talked about already today, return to office is a big problem. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is there's a lot of problems facing commercial real estate as a whole. It's the largest industry in the world, right? We power a lot of places where people can gather and companies can operate. And right now, with trying to get people to come back to the office, we have issues like there's a serious labor shortage in commercial real estate. There's about 5 times less workers in real estate than there was before the pandemic. So there's a mass exodus with property management and building engineers. And so you're starting to see buildings in general not operate at its highest capacity. We also have a inefficiency across building systems. So we're looking at climate change regulations that are coming at business owners and real estate owners that they don't even know where to start with what to do from that perspective. And then we added on, this hybrid work challenge and people looking at how and whether they're taking on leases and looking at, whether they're going to have their workers come back. And so thinking about how people are looking at offices or any kind of commercial real estate, they need more tools. So they need more data to understand how people use space, when they use space, why they use space, and then how the human side of it interacts with the building systems. There's no uniformity across building systems in general, so we don't know what systems work better. We don't know how they're influenced by human actions or human inaction, right? We've got stagnant buildings where water's not running and you have problems with Legionnaire, right? And so you have a lot of different challenges, but what we do at Cohesion, we're a smart building software platform that brings together all the different disparate software systems in the building and hardware systems in the building. And then we leverage IoT to understand how space is utilized in real time or how pollutants or any sort of other environmental factors in real time affect space. And so what we're doing from a return to office is that people they've gotten used to 2 years of home and smart homes. A lot of office workers have gotten used to that. So this ease of technology of how they can be at home and they can turn on their lights from speaking to their speaker, right? And or they can order a car, order food off of an app. So they've gotten used to this behavior, and coming into the office, we have to bring a lot of those technologies into the office and make that ease of this we're in a hybrid work world, and I think that's not going to change. Whether or not it's going to be 1 to 2 days, which is kind of what we're seeing, to 3 to 4 days and 1 day at home. We'll see how next year kind of pans out, but we need to make the technologies easier, not just for the human experience of those coming in, but for the operators that operate buildings. They need more tools to remote operate when a building engineer gets sick, or the building engineer is now shared over six buildings because there's a shortage of labor. So we provide the tools for building management, ownership, and commercial landlords to help ease that burden and assist in bringing people back, but also collecting the data to make buildings more efficient as well.
So both of you deal on lots and lots of data, right? This is a data-driven, both of your businesses are data-driven, and it's data for your customers and the insights that data provides. Kristen, I'm wondering how difficult the patchwork of data rules, particularly data privacy rules, affects your ability to operate. So Illinois, for example, has its own biometric data law that no other state has. California thought they were going to write a law for the country, and then a bunch of other states decided they'd write a different law. Congress hasn't been able to come together, but Europe introduced GDPR and attempted to impose it on the world. And now the FTC has decided that they want to get in on the action and see what they can do. It's a mess. What does that mess mean for your business?
So we're a global company. We operate in 120 countries in the world. And I'm embarrassed that the United States, where so much of this technology came from, couldn't come up with the rule. And that as global companies, we start defaulting to GDPR because it's the standard that is sort of being followed, and California is kind of a baby GDPR if you think about it. And so it's impossible to operate in the United States on any standardized basis to, for whether and for Zebra, we have worker data, right? This is not consumer data. This is your employees' data of how many scans did they do, where is the inventory, where are the people, where are the products. Very different. And so we have an entire framework around driving consumer data, and we're not thinking about company data or worker data. And that is a different group of data than what we seem to want to regulate. And I'm not saying we don't need to come up with a regulation in consumer data, but that shouldn't drive the business data. And we need to have something that's standardized, because you're going to go to either the lowest common or the highest common denominator. And either one, that might not be right size. So really looking for government to come up with it, because honestly, we pick one, we roll with it, and when there's a change, it becomes a little bit of chaotic, trying to react to it.
Data privacy is not the only area where we kind of have a complicated mess. There's a lot of interoperability that we take for granted, when you go to plug in your phone charger into a wall, that the outlet everywhere in the United States is going to be the same, for example. You're dealing in a new space where there aren't a lot of interoperability standards. How do you see, one, what's the need for interoperability standards? And two, what's the best way for those to develop and for us to take advantage of what standardization would provide?
Yeah, building systems, like Neil mentioned, don't talk to one another, or historically have not, and there were no standards for that. And so interoperability, like understanding the security access control to elevators, that was pretty cornered by the large OEMs that said, we're going to own this space. And they're still not the most open to working with one another. A lot of companies actually are, and I would say from picking on elevators, because they are the most difficult companies to work with, the non-US based large elevator companies are actually a lot easier to work with from a data sharing interoperability perspective. And that's because they see that there's an opportunity for businesses to work together and share data, have open APIs where they can, there's standards in these open APIs that can communicate and have data talk to one another and interoperate. But right now, buildings and owners don't know that can happen. And so there's more of we need to standardize that everyone should have this open capability for systems to talk to one another. It is changing. 4 years ago, pre-pandemic, nobody would share. And so the idea, IoT and the idea of smart building concepts or smart homes is now changing. So if you've ever gone into like a Google Home and tried to set up a smart home by yourself, some are very easy, some are not as easy. Some take 10 steps, like if you go, if it's a Google product, it's a tap of a button because there's standardization across that interoperability. If it's another product, you have to take 10 steps to get that on, and by standardizing it, you're actually enhancing the user experience, and so they're more likely to do things if it's easy. So I think interoperability is a big opportunity, and for us, across many industries, not just commercial real estate, but across a lot of industries. So I think we need to get there, and standardization is going to be different for every industry.
So I want to ask both of you, whether you're talking about interoperability standards, whether you're talking about data privacy, we could have the same conversation about AI and the framework there. Does that facilitate competition? I mean, you're a 50-plus year established company, new company. How do you view this as creating a playing field that encourages competition, and maybe competition even against your own companies? Is that the way you think of coming together on these common standards or a level playing field on data privacy?
Yeah. So I absolutely, I'm a lawyer, right? So, we think intellectual property law, we think competition law, but I absolutely think that a standard, it lets everyone operate to that. So whether you're small or you're big, you know what the rule is, you know what the rule of play is, okay? And there's intellectual property laws that protect the value that people are putting in. There's standard essential patents. They have value. You can put them in there, but you can operate on that and work against that framework. And I think having the government frame first, so whether it's in artificial intelligence, and regulate later as we sort through it, would at least allow us to continue to go. Because right now, you've got segments. We don't talk to each other. And if we're looking at some level of efficiency, now I'm not trying to, steal people's proprietary components, because we have them too, right? We file a lot of patents. But on the other hand, knowing that we can communicate, that our devices can be used in an environment where another device can be, and they can work together, would really allow, I think, competition to bloom. And I know that sounds, reverse, because the idea is a standard, how can competition bloom? But it allows everyone to know what they're working toward. And I think from a job creation and from a, interoperability and use would be such a better approach. And we're at the cusp of that with AI in particular. We're already behind it on so many other things. But with AI, I think we could get there if we could work together as a community with, as Suzanne said, community with government to sort of sort through that framework.
I want to go to an audience question. What are the current desires of leadership and staff in CSR and philanthropic priorities? Drew, do you want to jump in on that one? Or?
Repeat the question.
Sure. Current desires of leadership in CSR and philanthropic priorities. One of the things that we talked about as we were preparing for this is some of how what Cohesion does is help companies meet some of those sustainability priorities. What are your clients kind of asking of you that they're trying to achieve?
One of the things is just understanding and baselining. So one, understanding what is the baseline of indoor air quality within a building? What is the baseline of how people use space in a building? That's a big one right now. It's the utilization of space and how we're building towards community gathering, right? Today here in this room, we don't know what we're breathing in the air, right? There's plenty of breeze in here. It's kind of cold, so we're probably fine. But it's, we have a lot of baselining to do across the business, and I think that's just one of the big parts of, from a CSR standpoint, it's starting with here's where we are, and then applying goals to it. So, from the scary word of ESG, I know we talked a little bit about this, but we help companies create that ESG reporting framework, which is just a baseline, and it's actually not. You got to start somewhere. And so we help them from a social standpoint, not just sustainability, because everyone thinks that ESG is just about environmental. And there's a social component to it and a governance component to it that helps them think about, well, just let's start with defining it, and then over time you can start to build on it. And so for us, we help a lot with telling the story first and then building on that.
So, Kristen, I want to go to another audience question. It's something you and I have talked a little bit about, and that is, how can we bring more transparency to our industries to show the real impacts that poor government policy has on business? You're busy running a company. You're busy meeting, your customer demands, and bad public policy is this annoying thing that you have to deal with. And sometimes it gets so bad that you have to kind of engage and push back. What's the best way to do that for Zebra Technologies from your experience? How do we shine a light on the things that businesses need?
Yeah, well, this was not planned, but I'd meant to speak about this earlier and failed to. So Zebra is a large company, but we are not the largest of the large, right? And so for our ability and frankly budget and voice, it's banding together, right? Being able to come together. The chamber has been a great, whether it was on privacy and security, because as I said before, no one was talking about worker data. Everyone was talking about consumer data. And the chamber championed our voice on worker data, and we got together with big tech to talk about that. And then they sort of pulled it through because, even as a large company, we don't have that kind of pull and say in the government. So for me, it's been getting with other community, other businesses and talking about our needs, and with the chamber's advocacy or with other advocacy approaches, being able to at least say, here's an issue, do you see it? By ourselves, I just don't think I know Zebra didn't have by itself its own voice, whether it was on tariffs. Section 301 tariffs hurt us hard, and we were really negatively impacted. And having the chamber's support and the ability to testify, that allowed a lot of the, and it's not solved by any means, but at least allowed some action to be taken.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and this one just came in, but is already getting likes. Everyone's dealing with the worker shortage problem. Have you all developed strategies to attract and diversify your pipeline into your companies? And how are you meeting demand with the shortage of workers? Drew?
I run a software company, so for us, software engineers are really, really, really difficult to attract. But I think culture is a huge part of what keeps people there. We're a startup, so we're about 4.5 years old. We don't pay the highest salaries, and when down the street, big tech is paying $400,000 base salary to an engineer competing against us, it's really difficult to find those engineers. And so I think it's a real push for culture. It's about, I agree, I think Suzanne said we need clarity for how it's not ambiguity for return to office and what culture looks like is not our friend. So I think we have to commit to actually, telling people what we have as a policy from a company standpoint. But I think it's all about culture and it's training. And one of the things that we're starting to see from our younger workforce is that they get more mentorship opportunities and training if they come into the office and they see some of the senior leaders. And so I think culture is at the
Kristen,
forefront.
same for Zebra?
And I will just, I know we're running short on time. Similar with culture, we've been working a lot with our inclusion networks, right? So you drive a community and upscoping folks. So we have folks in manufacturing. We have folks who do repair services. But as we work through, what their skills are and what they want to do. I have an employee who's 45 years out of an office and started on the manufacturing floor, and now he runs environmental health and safety for that area. But it was this idea of understanding what someone's passion is and training up. Now, look, we have a lot of software engineers, and it's hard for us, right? And we are global, and so I think that we as a community have to look at how can we educate. Not everyone needs to go to college, right? You can do 2-year, you can learn how to work with technology that doesn't require a 4-year degree, right? You can work with it, and we are training, folks in different aspects of our business into where their passions are. It is not a solution yet, but it is a step in the right direction, and I think for today, that's as good as we can get, is just keep moving forward.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Join me in thanking Kristen and Thru for joining us today and sharing their insights.